As independent contractors, many online teachers and creators often have questions about what their taxes will look like. What deductions can you take on? Are there any other business expenses that we can chalk up as a deduction as well? I hope this helps you go into tax season with a little less stress and a little more confidence.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm Ryan Phillips. I own a financial planning firm based out of Northern Virginia, just outside of DC. I work with families mostly in their 30s and 40s, like some of you as well. I own my own business too, so I have some experience with some of the business aspects from a tax perspective for myself. I'm a certified financial planner, so I kind of have the background and education really to do comprehensive financial planning. I'm also a CFA, chartered financial analyst, help clients with investments. I know we're talking about taxes tonight and tax planning. Taxes are a very large expense for almost everyone, so it's something universal. Talk with clients frequently about that. So looking forward to talking with you all tonight about taxes.
Rock and Ryan, well, thank you so much. We do appreciate it. And it should be made very clear that Ryan is not a CPA. Ryan, do you want to make this disclosure that nothing we say tonight should be taken for
Yeah, so just you got to start off with just if you have specific questions, I will do my best to try to answer them, but it's definitely recommended for personal questions to seek qualified advice from a certified public accountant.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you. So as we mentioned before, most of us here are online teachers, or we sell products online. Perhaps teachers pay teachers, something like that. And so with that in mind, we're likely independent contractors, right, Ryan? Can you give us a little definition about who would be and maybe who wouldn't be an independent contractor?
Yeah, so that's a good question. There's a lot of terminology, right? There's a lot of different nomenclature that's used. It can kind of be confusing sometimes. But to me, when I think of independent contractor, that really is an engagement where there's another business involved as well, right? So there's another business that has contracted with you to work on their behalf. You could also be just a business owner. Maybe you sell things directly or provide your services directly to your students or your customers. So you don't necessarily have to be an independent contractor. In that sense, you could just be a business owner and have your business structured in a variety of different ways.
That's true. So I think, especially in my case, I'm super diversified. So I've got platforms that I work for. I teach independently. I've got some other content creation things on the side. So there's a lot to take into account and perhaps a lot of forms that we may need. So if that's something that we're starting to get into, kind of thinking about forms and kind of these big questions of how we might get paid. So speaking from experience, and in the chat, I know some of my friends who are in there will be able to chime in on how they get paid. So PayPal, Stripe, Plaid, using things like the platform that we're on today, to get paid using invoices from our students. What types of forms would we need to take into account when we're declaring our taxes?
Yeah, so a lot of times you should receive documentation describing different incomes that you receive. So the form that most folks are familiar with is the 1099. Now there are all sorts of 1099s with all sorts of letters that come after them that can mean different things. But I think the important thing, the first point to remember is just that the 1099 is a broad form that's used to describe any interest or income that you receive in a year and any tax withholdings. So as business owners or where you perform work, you're likely receiving some form of 1099.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we were talking before we started, I was just working on my taxes today with somebody. And so I was going through 1099K from Stripe, my 1099 INT from my bank, 1099 div from any investments that you have. So these are types of things that you may need to seek out. For example, on Stripe, I needed to go seek that out, but others will get emailed to you. So just keeping those in mind. Just
forms, one quick point, Missy, if I could just, sometimes you'll need to go seek these out. Just because you don't get one doesn't mean that there might not be income that you need to report somewhere. So always good to just kind of keep that in mind. The other thing is I just would share, don't always just assume that everything you get on these is correct. Look them over, because the reporting companies make mistakes as well. So for example, I get a 1099 K. I do one-time financial plans and my clients pay me by credit card. Well, a couple of years ago, I had someone sign up and then cancel and get a refund right away. Well, that was wrong on my 1099. They hadn't caught the refund. So I guess the key point is just, yeah, look out for these forms, but also it's good to just look them over, make sure that what's on there passes the smell test of what you're expecting as well.
Really good point. Really good point. Okay. Now, I know there are at least a couple people here tonight that teach in a brick and mortar school. So a traditional public school, private school, on the ground traditional school. They're going to need to do something in addition to these 1099s, right? What types of forms are they looking at? Like a W-9, W-2?
Yeah, so most folks that are employed in traditional structures should receive a W-2, which is just a wage statement that shows your earnings, different withholdings, benefits. The W-9 form really is more of a certification form. It can be used in a variety of different ways, but most people who are employed by someone else are most familiar with the W-2.
Okay, cool. So keep your W-2 in mind if you're employed in a school or some other place. I know some of us have part-time jobs in addition to the online teaching activities that we might do. So that's important. Awesome. And we had a question from someone that you and I both know, Jenny, who asked, is there a minimum amount that we need to take into account when we're declaring taxes? If we make under a certain number, do we need to declare?
Yeah, is there a certain de minimis level? And the answer with taxes, sometimes it can be kind of gray. It can be yes and no. I would say the general answer is no, there isn't. If you have any income, it needs to be reported. Just like if you got a 1099 interest you were talking about, Melissa, of $3 from a bank, technically, even though it's only $3, you're still required to report that income. The couple caveats are, if you are a small business, you can take some expenses as deductions, which we'll talk about. So if you can actually, maybe structure things that you have a loss for the business. The only other just nuance is that some folks, if your overall household income is low enough, you may not need to file a tax return at all. But generally, that's a pretty low figure.
Rare case. Okay, yeah. So it may depend also on if we're filing jointly, filing separately, that sort of thing. So something to keep in mind, and also bring to your tax professional if you're doing that. Make sure you know what your status is. So awesome. And you did mention deductions. So this is something that I feel like I've learned a lot about in the past 2 years, just being a little bit more independent in this teaching sphere, figuring out what a home office can entail in terms of deductions, tools that we use in our teaching businesses, tech, record keeping ideas. What would you say would be a helpful way to keep track of our deductions and what might qualify as a deduction?
Yeah, so two-part, I guess. What's a good way to track your deductions, and then kind of talking about deductions more broadly. So I guess it depends the size of your business and how much you want to spend. If you're looking for a more straightforward approach, I think an Excel sheet or a Google Doc likely is what most people will use. If you want to spend a little bit more money, the QuickBooks is a great solution for tracking expenses. They have different suites of products on QuickBooks that kind of range in price to consider. Now, as far as what counts as a business expense or deduction, the terms that the IRS uses is necessary and ordinary to your business. Okay. So you kind of have to think through, is this a necessary expense to what you do, right? So I'm a financial advisor. I talk with people. So I need a phone, right? Like I need to call people. That's necessary to what I do. The second piece, ordinary. Is it ordinary for someone in your field to take that as an expense. Again, kind of going back to a smell test, is that something that it would be ordinary for a teacher?
Well, I may chime in there. I mean, some of my deductions this year are a new camera setup. I'm filming a lot more, getting new headphones, which I use exclusively for business, a new office chair, things like that that are absolutely normal and necessary, I hope, for a business like this.
Yeah, exactly. And definitely necessary, definitely ordinary. That's where there isn't always a definitive answer. You have to look at things. You have to use your judgment. Could you get a $10,000 office chair?
Yeah.
That's where, maybe you could, maybe you couldn't. Depends on your business, depends if that could be considered, again, necessary and ordinary.
Makes sense. Okay, cool. And other deductions, I'm thinking like office space, internet connection, software. Some of us use something called Manicam to kind of spruce up our background, stuff like that. Those types of things we should also take into account.
Yeah, definitely. Any sorts of things technology wise that you're using. The office space is definitely a big one. There used to be a more complicated method for calculating depreciation. The IRS has been helpful. They have a more straightforward approach where you could take a $5 deduction per square foot of your office space that you use. So that's a really beneficial deduction for most people. The only caveat there is that it does, with all these expenses and deductions, if anything is used partially for business and partially for personal, then they should be prorated based on how you use them.
Great. So you would just, cut that in half if it's 50-50 for something else. So that makes sense. So yeah, literally I have calculated the area I'm standing in presently, and that is my office because nothing else happens in this corner of the house. So things like that. I just want to encourage you guys who are watching that this does not have to be super complicated. What Ryan is walking us through is not rocket science. It kind of feels like it sometimes, but I think once you start to look at how simple this can be, you can kind of step back and take those deductions. Don't be scared of those. Cool. Some of us have kids, Ryan. What does that look like in terms of deductions?
So that's where it gets a little more complicated, and I think depends on the size of your business and what you're doing. If it's a full-time role, is it part-time? I think definitely if you step into more of a full-time with larger incomes, then there could be some more complicated planning that you could incorporate for health costs or dependent care costs, things like that. When you start getting into a little more complex tax planning, there tends to be a little bit more of a cost up front, perhaps, to consider if some of those deductions or benefits make sense. That's why, it just depends, I think, on the size of the business and how much time and resources maybe you're willing to spend. Sure,
that makes sense. Makes complete sense. Okay, well, cool. And I should mention that this webinar is actually being hosted on Vay. So as we mentioned, all those forms that we were talking about, 1099s of different sorts, it's kind of overwhelming to have a bunch of those coming in. So there are tools, like if you did host all your classes on a tool like Vay, you would get one single 1099K Stripe. So there are ways to cut down the paperwork. And I love that we can have these deduction ideas as well. So it's all nice to kind of think ahead and try to set ourselves up for success in 2023. So Ryan, if you were to, and I may catch you off guard a little bit here, but if you were to think about advising someone in an independent contractor role, what would you tell them to kind of optimize, or what would you advise them to do in terms of planning ahead for the next tax season next year?
Yeah, I think one thing, with taxes, it tends to be, even if you work with an accountant, they tend to be very looking in the rear view mirror, right? We get to January 2023, we're thinking about tax year 2022, and it's too late at that point, right? Because the things that you can do need to happen during that calendar year. So I think just talking about it and planning is really powerful. making sure that you're saving and escrowing for tax costs for a business, if there's no withholdings, is where some people get caught off guard at tax time.
Okay,
So
I'm gonna stop you right there. What is escrow?
yeah, so just that's a word that is unnecessarily fancy. Just setting aside some cash in another account, right?
Okay.
Like just
Okay.
you get paid $1,000, put a couple hundred aside in another account.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, just like when your mortgage company escrows funds, they just pull it out, just do it automatic. You get paid, move it over from one place to another place so that you have those funds set aside at tax time.
Okay, all right, cool. So saving up, perhaps finding some sort of system. I use something called Notion a lot to keep track of finances, income, that sort of thing. Having one place and getting these systems set up in January makes things a heck of a lot easier come the next January when you're pulling everything together. So I know of some people in the online teaching space who do quarterly taxes. Is that something you would recommend people do, or maybe there are situations that people would benefit from that?
Yeah, so you can, if you don't pay in enough taxes, so one question that's always good to ask yourself in the beginning of one year to the next is, what is changing? So if you went from having a very small business to all of a sudden your product you sell has exploded and your revenues and incomes are going to just really grow, that can be a big change. And if you don't pay in enough taxes in advance, you can have penalties and interest associated with that. So by paying quarterly estimated tax payments, that is a way to make sure that you're safe, that you've paid enough in, and you don't get assessed any interest or penalties for underpayment.
Nice. Okay. All right. Cool. I was wondering about the benefits of that. Okay. Cool.
Yeah,
well,
and it's good that can kind of get it on autopilot too.
Sure.
The trade-off is, ideally, we prefer not to give money to the IRS too soon or when we don't have to.
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, well, we are getting near the end of our time today, and so I want to give you guys a chance to ask questions. If you do have questions, throw them in the chat. If you are watching this later on YouTube or another platform, please feel free to put those in the discussion, the comments below. But I know just looking at who's here today, we've got some interesting future international people moving abroad in the future, people who have recently moved back to the US, people who are kind of changing their teaching setups at the moment. And so if you guys have questions, if you're here for a specific doubt or you've got something you'd like to ask, please get that in the chat and we'll take that to Ryan. But I should mention, Ryan, you've been so generous with your time coming here. And so I love that you have a great resource for us. You have GuidePoint, and this is your company that you've grown. And can you tell us a little bit of what people could expect from GuidePoint? What would GuidePoint provide for people who are looking for financial guidance?
Yeah, so I work, as I kind of share with kind of mostly families in their 30s and 40s. So putting together a comprehensive financial plan is something I do with everyone that just kind of looks at, we're talking about taxes tonight. Taxes are just one piece of it. So it's looking at, in the coming years, what do you and your family want to do? And how best to utilize your resources and optimize it ultimately so that we can enjoy life and do all the things that we want.
Yeah, rocking. I love it. Well, if that's something that you're looking toward, Ryan is a great person to ask. You'll see his email right there on his screen. And Abby has got a question for us. Any tips for state tax? And Abby, you're in Roanoke, so great Commonwealth. Ryan and I are from Virginia as well. So Ryan, any tips on state tax, perhaps Virginia specific as well?
Yeah, I love Roanoke, the Star City. I went to Virginia Tech and spent some good time in Roanoke. So yeah, on state taxes, that's a great question. You need to really, it changes state by state of different rules and things you can do. If you have kids in the state of Virginia, if you make contributions to Virginia 529 plans, you can get a tax deduction there. I do know of some CPAs that there are certain credits in Virginia you can purchase in advance, land credits. That's a little bit more complicated. But those are the first two things that jump out to me.
Cool. Okay. And moving abroad, they're moving to Thailand in July. So any international tips? I can relate to this too, but you already mentioned that international taxes are complicated. Any tips there?
Yeah, I would definitely get together with folks that have done it, and talk through the practical logistics. You know, as a U.S. citizen, right, we're always taxed. It doesn't matter where you go. If you're a citizen, your income is taxed, here. So it's kind of looking through and seeing the local requirements, which obviously are going to vary by country, and just seeing any treaties or anything that just works together with local tax and U.S.
Absolutely. And Abby, I can speak to that. I can hook you up with somebody who is specialized in international taxes as well. And in your particular situation, that would be helpful. But thinking about the benefits that you enjoy in the country where you live, that can also pay in. So for example, medical benefits that you may receive. I know those are things that I'm taking in to account this year. So awesome. Well, great. Any more questions? If you have them, holler. But Ryan, thank you so much. And as we do wrap up, feel free to throw more questions in there. But I would be remiss if we did not thank Vay for their generous hosting of this webinar. They are a great tool for teacherpreneurs who are looking to invoice and host and communicate with their students. And so this is a really great solution for your teaching business if you're looking for something new to host it all in one place. So you can scan that QR code if that's something that you're looking for. And we will go ahead and wrap up today then, Ryan. Thank you so much for being here, and you guys who are here with us. Again, taxes don't have to be scary. Just got a plan, right, Ryan? Would that be the takeaway?
You're going to have to deal with things one way or the other, right? So
True.
Better to plan in advance.
Rockin'. All right. Well, Ryan, thank you for being here. And to you guys who are with us today, thank you so much.